Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast. Together we dive into the world of sci-fi and science fiction. From episodes of Star Trek, Star Wars, to The Walking Dead, Resident Evil, all the hot new science fiction movies from the back doors of Marvel or DC. The Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast. You'll never look at science fiction the same way again.
Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Sci-Fi Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Alex. I know, today you are expecting another installment on Kevin J. Anderson's X-Files EU book, Ruins. But no, that will have to wait for another day, because today I want to talk about The Boys Season 2, Episode 1. I waited a few days so that folks would have some time to watch it. So I waited a week, really. But we're going to talk about it today. So if you've not seen it yet and you don't want any spoilers, then maybe save this one for a few days from now when you have binge watched the first few episodes. And by that, yes, I do also mean that they released the first couple episodes and now we have to wait a week at a time for the next one to come out. What is this, 1998? I would like to binge all of this in 2 days like I did for Season 1, please. But alas, that is not what we're being given. And it's probably for the best. I think we all could use a lesson in delayed gratification. Although, in the middle of COVID-19, really, now is the time for delayed gratification? But I digress. So we're going to talk about that today. I really enjoyed the first season, as I'm sure you guys are well aware of by the fact that I did an episode at a time for it. And we're going to do it again. There is a lot to cover in episode 1, and this is your final warning before we go into spoilers. Alright, you gone now? Alright, 3, 2, 1. Alright, so today with The Boys Season 2, Episode 1, we're going to talk about where Starlight finds herself. Nowadays, we're also going to see what the world looks like for Homelander and Billy post Stillwell having been killed. And we are going to check in on the Deep and what all the other characters are up to. Let's be honest, there's a lot going on in this episode, you guys. We have a lot going on. Now that we're in Season 2 and we really know all of the other characters, we are getting to flesh them out some more and getting to know them as individuals. Up until now, we've mostly gotten to see them in context with each other. And don't get me wrong, I absolutely love that. I love juxtaposing these characters with each other in different situations and getting to see different facets of their personality in that way. But we're also starting to get them split up a little bit more and getting to learn more about their backstories in Season 2. And when this episode starts out, we get to see the background of what happened in Season 1. So the TLDR of that is that Billy Butcher has roped the boys. So Huey, this guy used to just work at a video store, or an electronics store, really. He's roped him into his campaign against Soups because Huey's girlfriend Robin was killed by A-Train when he was really hopped up on this substance called Compound V that they used to make superheroes to begin with. But if you're already a Soup, then it results in you being like extra strong or extra fast. It amps up your powers like way higher. So it's kind of like steroids for superheroes. But it also makes them like very high too. They are almost like they're on cocaine or speed or something. So Robin got killed by A-Train and he showed absolutely no remorse for it, and so Huey felt very compelled to take up that mantle and that vendetta, but the more time he spent with Billy, just the deeper and deeper he got into it. He was more so just wanting to expose them, but Billy is wanting to just absolutely outright kill these soups. So Huey is essentially on a slippery slope and just keeps compromising bits of who he is until he finally just totally sets aside the Huey he was before and starts asserting himself. And that's part of his hero's journey. But he's also kind of an anti-hero because he's out here legit murdering the bad guys. But I would say that since Huey is not killing anybody else, that he's still arguably very much a hero. I have problems with Batman personally because Batman does not kill people, at least not as Bruce Wayne. Thomas Wayne Batman, he's gonna kill people. But for Bruce Wayne Batman, he doesn't kill anybody, and so he just keeps having them incarcerated in Arkham, and they're super villains, and so they figure out how to get out a lot. The amount of security at Arkham Asylum is laughable. It's not it's not great security, you guys. So they break out all the time, whether that's like Man-Bat or Killer Croc or Harley Quinn or the Joker or Poison Ivy and Catwoman. They're always breaking out of there. All the characters. And so because of that, because Batman won't kill them, I think that Batman is also largely to blame for a lot of the problems that Gotham sees. Like, they've killed cumulatively thousands and thousands of people. And Batman's like, it's fine. So, if you're going to be a vigilante superhero, it's very confusing for me where Batman draws that line, and I disagree with him. And we see that difference in the Marvel universe, especially in the MCU, where people absolutely do get killed. The supervillains do get killed. They go ahead and stop them. And that's because they're supervillains. Like, I'm not advocating for Batman to go out there and kill people in general, like killing people who are like robbing stores and stuff. Nothing like that. I'm just saying, in this fantastical universe, Batman, you're not gonna kill the Joker when he just like dropped 2 trains full of people into the ocean or whatever he's done this week. I'm just saying. Why does the Joker just keep getting sentenced to Arkham in these scenarios? It's bewildering, at the very least. So in The Boys, and much like in parts of the MCU, they take care of the problem. And I'm not advocating for vigilantism in real life. Remember, this is a fantasy show. So this is superheroes. It's sci-fi, definitely, because they are using Compound V to create them and everything. But it also is a bit of a satirical fantasy. They're taking this superhero vigilantism to the extreme, where they're not just vigilantes. Rather, the superheroes have been deputized, and the people who are fighting them in this abuse of power are the vigilantes. It's really flipped it on its head, and I think it's a super smart show. I really appreciate Garth Ennis's creation, and also all the work that Eric Kripke has put into bringing this to life. All of the actors and crew and everyone who are involved in this are fantastic, in my opinion. But I digress. So, TLDR, Huey is our good guy on his hero's journey, and he teams up with Billy Butcher, who is pretty chaotic in his mission. But also, he is going for a good thing. We find out that Homelander sexually assaulted Billy's wife shortly before Rebecca disappeared for years and years. She was gone for like 9 years, and then we find out that she's alive at the end of season 1. So, that's most of it. And I take it that if you're listening to this right now, that you have watched season 2, episode 1, and also thereby season 1. So I'm not going to go too far into the backstory on that. But after we get that full story arc, comprehensive recap of season 1 at the beginning of The Boys season 2, then we see kind of a montage. And it starts with a hearing, like a Senate hearing. And they're all sitting there arguing about this bill that they see in front of them, where they're trying to decide what the capacity of soups in the military is going to be. And we see that Giancarlo Esposito is sitting there. And if you remember from season 1, he's the big boss at Vought. He was Stillwell's boss. And he wants full oversight and direct reporting of the soups to him without having to pay any attention to the military chain of command. And he says that that's what other contractors get for the military, and so that's what he wants too. And the whole thing is done while we're also seeing soups do stuff in the background, where they are taking out the soup terrorist that we met at the end of season 1, Nakib, the one who can just explode everything around him. So he's going to be totally fine, but it's just a giant fireball around him. So we're seeing them take him out. So unfortunately, we don't get to know much more about him before they take him out, but I really like the way that this is spliced together in kind of a montage. It's not just music over top of it, though. We get to see and hear what they're actually saying. So the discussion between the policymakers, I don't know if it's the Senate or the House, but between them and Giancarlo Esposito and them, that is happening interspersed with going back and forth with what's happening with Nakib. And while they're doing this, there's just a guy who's like a senatorial page or something, and he's standing there with a box of sandwiches, like just a bunch of big sandwich orders. And he is calling out the orders that they had made so he can give the sandwiches to the appropriate people. So he's just handing out this lunch on the Senate floor as they are making these laws about the oversight of soups in the military. The mundanity of it is striking, and I really loved how they use that tone to really get across the point in the story. Everything that's happening right now is absolutely bonkers, but for them, this is just another day. They're not happy about it, but they feel politically pressed into having to do it. And also, with Homelander pushing for it and everything, not only could it result in an uprising of citizens if they don't play this carefully, but also they have a problem because Homelander himself could kill a bunch of them. It's very clear that most of them don't know how dangerous he is, but they're scared of his potential. They don't even know that he's a murderous psychopath. They just know that if he were to decide to use his powers for, quote, evil, unquote, that it could be catastrophic for them. Now, I hesitated just a bit there because I was about to say that it would be catastrophic for the American people, but let's face it, they don't really care about the American people. It's more about whether or not they'll be reelected. And that's specifically talking about the boys, like that universe, but also it is commentary on the American political system at large. Remember, this is satire, so this is just the truth and potential truths taken to the extreme. We're going to go on a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to catch up with the 7. Stay tuned.
Want to find out what movies to go see? Then check out the GSMC Movie Podcast. It's your ticket to the latest movies, whether it's a new blockbuster event, romantic, comedy, or action flick. This show has got it all covered. They talk some what to go see now, don't bother, what's hot on Netflix, and everything in between. That's gsmcpodcast.com/movie-podcast. When it's all about the movies, it has to be this new show. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were doing a recap of The Boys Season 1 and seeing where we've started out in Season 2, Episode 1. So we caught up with Nakib and the interactions between Mr. Edgar, the Big Boss Vought, played by Giancarlo Esposito, and the Senate or Congress, not sure which one, the politicians. And now we're going to catch up with what the Seven are up to. So in Season 1, Stillwell and the HR guys decided to tell everyone that Translucent was out fighting MS-13. So he was on an away mission, and that's why no one had seen him for a while, that he was on a special mission, like, not necessarily undercover, but I mean, he's translucent, so he could just be translucent. And so that's where he was. So they didn't want to admit that they were capable of dying, at least not at the hands of single ordinary people like Billy Butcher and Huey. So they just said that he was away. In the very first episode, right after the hearing and seeing that montage of that split up with Nakib being killed by one of the Seven, we also see that they are holding a funeral for Translucent, and they're pinning it on a South American cartel. And they're also using this to spur public support for fighting soup terrorists by also making up the last words of Translucent to be about saving Americans. And by making up, I mean outright lying. It's totally made up. They were not even there. They weren't anywhere near there when Translucent died. Remember that Frenchie had his girlfriend explode the apartment so that they could get Homelander to fly over there and distract them from where Translucent was, because they were about to get caught. So Homelander had just left from there. They had no idea. They didn't get to see Translucent's body parts, or, see them. I don't know. They didn't get to see his guts and everything that were in that box that Billy had coated in zinc, I believe. So lead is for Superman, but I think that, if I recall correctly, Homelander can't see through things that are coated with zinc. So they had put that at the bottom of the ocean, but the Deep had found it by talking to some porpoises or something. And so they did find the remains later on. But for a long time, Homelander didn't know where he was. Of course, Homelander doesn't care about anything but the image and everything and his own agenda. So it's not like he was exactly worried about Translucent per se, but about what this might mean for the Seven. And by the Seven, I mean for him. He is their figurehead, he's their leader, but also he is kind of like Scar in The Lion King. He has them all under his thumb, too. They're like the hyenas in a way, and they're all terrified. Except they aren't really bloodthirsty like the hyenas. Well, at least not all of them. A-Train definitely has made some questionable decisions, partly through the coercion of Homelander, partly due to substance abuse issues and some other problems he's had going on. But, we don't know much about Black Noir or his motivations. He seemed all too happy and content to go ahead and kill Kimiko. I don't want to say necessarily happy, because that connotes that he had some kind of joy from this, but he didn't really seem to be bothered by it like Maeve and Starlight are. And even the Deep seems to be going through some type of understanding, or perhaps his own type of awakening and journey about whether what he's doing and has been doing is right or wrong. I don't know how far he's gotten. We're not going to get ahead of ourselves. But you get my point. So we're not entirely sure about Black Noir or anything like that, but we know that some of the Seven have done some messed up stuff, including Translucent. Now, they all have their own reasons, but we have kind of a faction situation arising here in which Queen Maeve and Annie Starlight are scared of Homelander, but also they recognize that he is totally a villain, but they're taking a different stance than A-Train is, who also realizes the same thing. But we're at this funeral, right, for Translucent, and Homelander is leading it because he is, again, an ordained minister. So he is doing this preaching thing and is also having Annie there with him to sing a song. So she has a musical performance at the funeral. It's a little bit country, beautiful, feminine, strong. You can see exactly how they're trying to shape her character from a marketing perspective. Not for us as the viewer, but for all of the Americans that are in the universe of The Boys. So they're trying to make her seem like super all-American, down to earth, that kind of thing. I mean, she makes fireworks at this event, too, while she is singing. It's somebody's funeral, but they're having her make these fireworks because she's Starlight. That's what she does. She's essentially her own pyrotechnic show. So it's a song about the loss of a hero and America, and it's super exploitative, and it's definitely propaganda. Hilariously, and in true propaganda and exploitative form, it is called Never Truly Vanish because he is translucent. So that gave me a good chuckle. I wish I had a clip of the music. I'm going to have to go back through and listen to it myself, though, to find the lyrics, because those were not readily available on the internet. But you can see exactly how they're trying to market her. She is all-American, like apple pie, and that means country music, and that means femininity and strength in that way. And she's also doing fireworks, because what's more American than fireworks and the 4th of July? It's not necessarily saying it's the 4th of July, but you're getting these very strong tones of it, of just America right in the face. And that's the point. We also see that Starlight is having to hold hands with Homelander and walk around and just do all of these press junket things, talking about how much they are working together as a family, them, like the Seven, to, stay strong, and how Homelander's really leading them. And it is uncomfortable for sure, but they're doing their best to pull it off. At least Starlight is. Homelander's pretty haughty, as he always is. We also get to see the Deep. He is still in Sandusky, Ohio, banished for being called out for sexually assaulting Starlight. He wasn't banished for sexually assaulting anyone, still well admitted to the Deep that she knew he had done this to other women before, but he is instead being banished because he was found out about it. And that's bad PR. And Stillwell hated nothing more than she hated bad PR. So, he's still hanging out there, and he's having a rough time, kind of losing it a little bit. Huey is living in some kind of bunker. It's grimy and disgusting and dark and dank. Frenchie is also there, as are Kimiko and Mother's Milk and a bunch of unknown people, like a bunch, like 7, 14, I don't know. There's a whole bunch of people I did not recognize. We also see that A-Train is on a ventilator, still comatose. And after all of this, we see, Huey has seen this interview with Homelander and Starlight, and he's very clearly very upset. They didn't necessarily part on the best of terms last time, as she told him to run while she was saving A-Train's life from where his weakened heart from the Compound V gave him a heart attack. But she's also still not happy with him because Huey lied to her, like, a ton. So Starlight's upset with him, and he's very, very miserable, especially since they all also got burned at the end of Season 1. But I do like how we get to follow Starlight home after this crappy day of having to do these interviews with Homelander, of whom she's very clearly scared, and also terrified that he's going to find out about her letting Huey go. And she goes and looks in on A-Train pretty much every day and sees he's still on the ventilator, comatose. She doesn't have it in her to kill him or to let him die. She can't do it. And neither could Huey, even though that is the person who killed his girlfriend Robin. It was an accident, and one for which A-Train has no remorse, but Huey did not have it in him to just let A-Train die, even though he knew that A-Train would likely tell Homelander, and either one or both of them would keep trying to hunt him down afterwards. But we get to follow Starlight home, and we see that her room or her quarters, I'm not sure exactly where she's living, if she's in the tower, if Homelander's making them live there or what, but her place looks like a mansion, looks very nice, and we see her starting to undress from work. And remember, she fought tooth and nail with Stillwell in the first season to not have to wear skimpy outfits and just be this super hyped up sex symbol. And she lost that battle, but we see now that there's even more layers of padding and makeup and hair extensions, all of that jazz that are hyper feminizing her and trying to make her into a sex symbol. That's what the big hair, the big curly hair is for, and fake eyelashes, and they have her putting in like those padding, like the little chicken cutlets to make your boobs look bigger. She's having to take all of this off, and she does it slowly. She gets the boots off and everything, and she's just tired. And then we see her just staring in the mirror with it all wiped off, and she's upset, but ultimately she's resigned to what she's stuck with right now. This is the reality of Starlight's American dream coming true. It's been more of an American nightmare for her since the very beginning of getting it, with being sexually assaulted by the Deep. Like right after she had been announced as being Starlight, the nightmare began, and it just keeps getting grimmer as she is getting a glimpse behind the curtain and seeing that the machinations behind all of the glitz and glamour and what she thought was really true morality and trying to help people isn't actually all that it's cracked up to be. In season 1, she even got in trouble for saving a girl from being sexually assaulted because it wasn't on the marketing junket, and they were afraid it was going to end up being bad press. You can't help but feel bad for Annie. She's trying to do everything that she can to be a good person and to be a great superhero, but it seems like the more that Annie becomes Starlight, the more Annie hates Starlight. Starlight's not really who Annie wants to be. I think that's where we're heading, as we're going to see that Annie ultimately just wants to be Annie. We're going to go on a quick break, and when we come back, we are going to catch up with the Deep and what has happened regarding everyone's reaction to Stillwell's murder. Stay tuned.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were catching up with the Seven. The Deep is still in Sandusky, Ohio. Vought has decided to admit that Translucent is dead, although they have blamed it on a cartel for, of course, marketing and political maneuvering reasons. And we are now moving forward to seeing what's happening with Huey and Annie. Are they still in contact with each other anymore? What's happening? They were once so in love, and it was cute, but sadly, Huey lying to her all the time, even though we understand why he did it, has tragically caused a rift in their relationship, especially since she then tried to arrest him, and because of that, Billy went ahead and shot her with a high-caliber round. Granted, Billy knew that it wouldn't kill her, it would just slow her down, but also, Billy doesn't care if she lives or dies. Remember, he hates all soups equally, and that may even include baby soups, although that's going to be really complex for him now that he knows that his wife, Rebecca, had a son by Homelander. Even though she was sexually assaulted by Homelander. He raped her, and that's how she became pregnant with his child. But I'm not sure how far that will be meaningful for Billy, as this is still Rebecca's child. So he may be in for a bumpy road of personal growth. But we see that now Huey and Annie, even though they've been separated for a while, they have met together on a train. So they're on the subway together, and he looks like crap. And Annie tells him as much. She's like, hey, you look terrible. Because he tells her that she looks beautiful and everything. She goes, you look awful. She's like, I'm sorry, I can't lie to you about that one. And he's like, yeah, I know. So you can tell that they still have affection for each other, but Annie is still deeply wounded by him hiding so much from her and lying to her so much. And so the encounter is also incredibly tense. You can tell that Huey just wants to be near her, but he also understands why she's mad at him, and he's miserable from it. And she still has feelings for him. She still cares about him, but he has lied to her repeatedly, and she can't trust him, so she's hurt in that regard too. We also get to see that they are trying to orchestrate obtaining some Compound V, because they can't prove anything else without it. The CIA decided not to work with them because we have supervillains now. So instead, the Senate or Congress, whoever, the politicians and everyone have changed their tune and are now working with getting Vought and their soups into the military. It's not what any of them wanted, but the political posturing and marketing has been too much, and now the American politicians and the government in general, including the CIA, feel absolutely overwhelmed and are not able, in their minds, to go ahead and say no to this, because now the American people are calling for it, since Homelander used Compound V to home-grow supervillain terrorists. In the meantime, the Deep is, more or less going off the deep end. I'm not even sorry about that one. It had to be said. But so he is yelling profanities about the Marianas Trench while he blasts kids with water at a local splash pad. He might be drunk as well. He's on something. He's very miserable, and he gets arrested just by regular cops. In the meantime, Butcher has been framed for Stillwell's murder. So we know from having seen the end of Season 1 that it was actually Homelander who killed Stillwell, and he burnt her eyes out of her sockets. Not even just her eyes. He pretty much melted parts of her bones with the lasers. As he likes to yell at people, I will laser you! So he lasered her and burned out her eyes, a big old chunk of her face, and also, it likely went all the way through. So she was totally dead, but Billy knew there was no way he could get away from Homelander. This was his one opportunity to kill him, and he knew that blowing up the place might not be enough to really do it. But he was gonna go down trying, because now that Stillwell is dead, there was nothing that would prevent Homelander from killing him. And also, Billy's not too attached to life anyway. He's pretty much come to the conclusion that Rebecca, his wife, is dead now. So he was ready to die, and he went ahead and blew the house up anyway, even though there was totally a baby in the house. His hatred for Homelander is just that strong. But Homelander, of course, flew him, and apparently the baby, way out to where Rebecca was so that he could rub it in Billy's face before dumping Billy into the parking lot of someplace in the middle of nowhere. So now Billy knows that Rebecca is alive, but he has no way to reach her, no way to find her. He just frantically runs into a restaurant and uses a crayon and a placemat to scribble down anything he can remember about the house, and then he runs off. Because, of course, he has been framed for Stillwell's murder by Homelander. So we already know that Homelander figured out who everyone was, or at least Vought in general, figured out who everyone was in the last episode of season 1, and they all got burned really badly. They have all been outed. So since Homelander killed Stillwell himself because he's a sociopath, the fact of the matter is that Billy did plant that bomb and Billy did detonate it. So he is still getting blamed for this, and there's likely evidence to point to it. Plus, Homelander had already had a manhunt on for him before this. So it's really easy to just pin this on him because he's already done a thing. And by a thing, I mean, activities that have been decried in the public eye. Now, they're not going to say that he's killed Translucent because they don't want to give him power or make him any type of a martyr figure should Homelander decide to kill him or anything like that. But they are going to frame him, so he has to just keep running. In the meantime, the boys don't really know where Billy is. But with that Stillwell's death being pinned on him, and therefore also them, because they're his associates, they are all mega burned on public news. So this has gotten to be a huge deal. And now they're not able to hide anywhere even approaching just okay. That's why they're living in this gross sewer bunker looking place. Now, that does also mean that Vought is publicly down to 5 instead of the 7. Because not only is Translucent dead, but the Deep is still banished to Sandusky, Ohio for right now. So where does that really leave the 7? They have 2 empty spots that are now publicly acknowledged, and they also don't have Stillwell there. So who is the middleman now between Mr. Edgar and the 7? Well, turns out it's Ashley. Remember, I was upset with her getting let go in season 1? Well, she gets to come back. But now I'm just scared for her, because it turns out that Homelander is the one who recommended her for Stillwell's job. I'm glad that she's hired back because I like the character, but I am also scared for her. Now, don't get me wrong, Ashley's not necessarily a good person, but she's an interesting character, in my opinion. And unfortunately for her, Homelander outright even tells her that she's his mole and she's under his control. He's assigning her to do everything he wants. He's going to write his own PR and his own marketing and his own copy. He gets to decide how he handles all of his stuff. And she's going to just report to him about what's going on the 82nd floor. So the Vought 7 are on the top floor, floor number 99, but Mr. Edgar's office is on the 82nd floor. So he wants her to spy on Edgar for him. Homelander is also just absolutely off the rails right now. He super freaks out on Ashley with a speech about that, following some derogatory language against disabled folks, and then he also busts a blind superhero in his eardrums. Ashley is who selected this person. This character's name is Blind Spot, to be a replacement for Translucent on the 7. And she's very excited for it. She's framing this to Homelander as a diversity hire because Ashley is first and foremost a marketing person. And she's super stoked. She thinks it's going to be great for marketing and for PR and their image. And then Homelander's like, well, what about if someone does this? And then he claps the guy in the ears like as hard as possible and ruptures his eardrums with that pressure. He might have also actually killed the guy, but he just does it so calmly, but is also very angry at Ashley and like seething and letting her know, hey, you don't get to pick who goes on the 7. I get to pick who goes on the 7. I'm the boss in the situation, and that's why I picked you. You're going to be my lackey, and you're going to do what I want you to do. Don't come to me again and tell me who is going to be on the 7 or tell me how my life is going to be run. He got tired of the manipulation and the lies from Madeline, and he's determined to not trust anyone else ever again. We're going to go on a quick break, and when we come back, we are going to see what some of the other soups are looking like, even if they are not on the 7. And we're also going to catch up on how Mr. Edgar's doing when he's confronted by Homelander. Stay tuned.
Watching TV has changed over time. Streaming has become the new norm. That's why Golden State Media Concepts television podcast dives headfirst to the world of cord cutting. Want to be on the loop of what's hot in Netflix? Or if it's not a preference, what about original shows in Hulu? We've got you covered. Join us as we fill in the blank and talk about movies to stream and what show you should be binging. This is the Golden State Media Concepts television podcast.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about how Homelander recommended Ashley to replace Stillwell, whom he killed and pinned on Billy Butcher, just because he knew that he could control Ashley. He knew that he could frighten her into submission, and he intends to use that to his advantage to get her to spy on Mr. Edgar, the head of Vought, and also to let him run everything he wants to, just by using her as a figurehead. So she makes a lot of money, probably not as much as Madeline was making, because she had been tenured, essentially. She'd been there for so long, and had really proven herself to Mr. Edgar. But she's probably making quite a bit of money as the next highest up in Vought after Mr. Edgar. So she's making money, but at what cost, really? How much is that really worth to you if you're going to be targeted and frightened all the time? But then again, if you try to back out of a deal with Homelander, even if it was a deal you didn't know you made, it's going to be a problem. It's kind of like how Lando is lied to by Darth Vader, and then Darth Vader keeps changing their plan or their agreement. And Darth Vader just goes, hey, pray that I don't alter it any further. It's kind of like that, except for Ashley's not even willing or able to stand up to Homelander at that level. He's just really maimed or perhaps murdered somebody right in front of her. He does not give two craps about any of this. So he's really dangerous, and she's not safe enough to back out, to be honest. It would be suicide. So Ashley is very firmly stuck between a rock and a hard place. Like, she is wedged in there. We also get to see some other Supes, though. So, for the most part, we have seen Supes who are either superheroes, supervillains, or caught somewhere in the middle in this marketing scheme. So think Ezekiel or the lady who had wings and was singing at that religious expo, or also how Kimiko was experimented upon by Vought, particularly by Homelander, trying to make these homegrown terrorists. So we get to see another person who's not associated with this in the way that you would think. So this person is a Supe whose limbs grow back, and he allows people to chop them off for money in seedy motel rooms. So it's a certain amount of money for an arm versus a leg versus his member. Oh yeah, he will let you cut off anything. It reminds me partly of some of the early days of the internet and the Pain Olympics, if any of you guys recall that. But it grows back in this case, and so people can take out their dark, sick, twisted fantasies on this guy and not have any repercussions. He's not dead, he doesn't even stay maimed, so it seems pretty innocuous. Now, is this a gateway activity to actually going out and murdering people? Who knows? This is a new frontier in humanity. But it turns out that Annie knows this guy from the circuit that she had used to do, and he'd also done, with the religious expo. So it was a religious expo for Supes. So she knows this guy, she's following him around, she sees this happen in a seedy motel, and she decides that she needs to maybe get in contact with him. So I thought maybe she's going to recruit him for the 7. But we don't get to find that out until episode 2. What actually happens with him. So I'm going to leave that for now. But it's a very interesting concept, and I could totally see this happening. Also, when the guy's arm is cut off, he lets the people keep it as like a souvenir. It doesn't grow another body or anything, but he lets them keep the arm or leg or whatever he cut off. And after they cut off something, he's like, you enjoy that? Well, for this much money, I will let you cut off another part of my body. And they're like, okay, yeah, let's go to an ATM right now. I will go and get you $1,000 or however much out of the bank, and we'll be right back. So he takes advantage of them also being on this high from all of these endorphins and adrenaline from having cut off his arms to get more money out of them. And hey, it's a way to make a living. It brings up kind of the concepts of sex work. And is this sex work? Are these people getting sexual thrills from it? Is it equivalent to it because you are making money with your body in a taboo way? I don't know. But I like that you can draw these parallels there, because technically no one's getting hurt. Everyone in this situation is very much agreeing upon the terms of this, money for some type of activity with the body. Everyone's okay with it. No one is ultimately permanently harmed. So is it any different from a fight club either? Or boxing, like bare knuckle boxing? Or any type of boxing really, or fighting that results in people getting bloody or injured? His arm grows back like Deadpool, except he doesn't have a baby arm, and it's a lot quicker. So it's an interesting argument, and I would love to hear you guys' argument in both directions. Either way, hit me up on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook, and I would love to argue this out with you guys. Debate it out, really, like a friendly debate. Not, trying to go in on each other. I'm not trying to get you to hit me up so that I can give you a hard time. But you get where I'm coming from. I'm going to talk about this with my fellow geeks. So we see that guy, and then we also see another guy with every bone broken in one arm and a ton of broken ribs be brought in by another guy who only speaks French. Now, he's not bringing it into the hotel room. I segued that poorly. but he is bringing them into the weird, gross bunker that Frenchie and MM and everyone else is at. And MM immediately is saying, hey, that guy needs to go to an ER. Like, this is beyond any of our capabilities. Take him to an ER. We already saw what the boys were capable of in patching somebody up before when they were trying to patch up Mesmer, played by Haley Joel Osment, after Kimiko broke his hand. And it ended up just being like 2 wooden spoons duct taped together to be a splint. Hey, you use what you got. But MM is very right in saying, hey, we're not equipped to do all that. And they're like, well, we can't go to the ER. They're going to call the cops. And so Frenchie is trying to talk to this guy in French. But after he speaks with him, he looks super freaked out by whatever it is the guy says in French. And then we pop on over to Homelander, who is very upset when he is suddenly confronted with a new soup on the 7. And her name is Stormfront, played by Aya Cash. So he's not happy about this, and he looks like he's about ready to kill Ashley, like quite literally. But they're on camera when it happens, which doesn't seem to be an accident on Stormfront's part. She really does not give 2 craps about how Homelander's reacting to all this. She thinks that he's stuffy, and she doesn't like him. She has very strong chaotic bi energy, in my opinion. I like it. I'm not sure if she's a good guy or a bad guy yet. I don't know if there's some subterfuge going on, but we do know that she was appointed directly by Mr. Edgar. So he is super mad about her being appointed without his approval, but he knows Ashley didn't do this. So, she's safe for now, but we're kind of getting this impression of, Homelander is kind of Darth Vader, but it might very well be that Mr. Edgar could be the Emperor. We're going to see. He's 2 steps ahead of him. I do like that Stormfront is also, she's just so chaotic. She shows up by live streaming the commercial that's being filmed by Queen Maeve and Homelander. And I really enjoy how they approach that. So he can't maintain his public persona on this live stream and reveal all of his secrets. So he has to really put on his happy face and try to pretend that he's not super upset. Queen Maeve doesn't look necessarily thrilled because she's having to learn about this new person live, like literally the girl's live streaming it. But you know what? It's fine. This is maybe going to be fine for Queen Maeve. We're going to see. But we do see that Homelander is not happy about this. And so he flies on over to Mr. Edgar to complain. And he's like, hey, I am Vought. I am the face of this place. I'm who everyone associates with it. I'm your moneymaker. And so you had better do what I want. And instead of responding to anything that Homelander's just said, Mr. Edgar responds to this entire diatribe with a question. And it totally puts Homelander off. Mr. Edgar has stayed standing this entire time, and Homelander has sat down and just reclined back in some furniture because he feels like he has the upper hand, and so he can take this submissive position. But by Mr. Edgar not backing down and this not going the way he wanted to, you can see that it makes Homelander feel very vulnerable and very upset. So he looks more like a little boy being chastised, which is something that Madeline Stillwell was able to use to manipulate him before. But this is very different. She was more of a doting mother figure, and that's why part of the sexualization was so weird. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention the milk drinking episode. It was played very sexually as it was supposed to be, and I think that the guy who plays Homelander did an excellent job at it. I was definitely a little skeeved out. No kink shame, but that's how it was played to be. So I tip my hat to Anthony Starr. Mission objective achieved. That was unsettling and very much telling us more about who Homelander is as a person without any words at all. We are really getting his mommy issues across, and we did a great job. If you don't know what I'm talking about by the milk scene, then you haven't watched the episode, or you picked, I don't know, either a really great time to go to the bathroom or a terrible time to go to the bathroom. Depends on how you look at it, really. But you should definitely see it at least once, so you know what I'm talking about. And much like pornography, you'll know it when you see it. Mr. Edgar, though, unloads on Homelander in his very Giancarlo Esposito way, where he's not even really yelling, he's just quiet, but it's unnerving. Giancarlo Esposito and Kate Mulgrew both have this very scary way of coming across when they get quiet. Them yelling is way less scary than them being very quiet and serious. And Giancarlo Esposito has done it again, where he's even able to come across as menacing when we know that Homelander is a sociopath who has killed a ton of people who did not necessarily need to be killed just because he felt like it. Mr. Edgar tells him that he's actually made a bigger mess. He's not done this great job that he thinks he's done, that Homelander has just been incredibly messy, and that Mr. Edgar is now having to clean up his mess. So he's not even going, hey, you're not in charge, I am. He is absolutely rubbing his nose in it, like he's a bad puppy who is crapped on the carpet or something. Now, don't get me wrong, puppies are not doing anything bad by pooping on the carpet. They don't know yet, they're still learning. Whereas Homelander definitely knows you're not supposed to just murder Madeline Stillwell, but he did it, and so Mr. Edgar is treating him like that. He's just going, hey, I know Madeline used to just bop you in the nose with a newspaper, but I'm going to go ahead and just absolutely rub your face in it, which is also mean to do to a puppy, but for Homelander, it's very fitting. He has very much done some crazy stuff. He has not controlled the release of Compound V. As Mr. Edgar explains to him, Compound V is more so that big moneymaker. Homelander is, according to Mr. Edgar, effectively replaceable. He's not the moneymaker that he thinks he is. He's not the leader or the head that he thinks he is. Now, this very much angers Homelander, and when he gets angry, he gets more dangerous. But clearly, he is going to, at least for now, just leave Mr. Edgar's office. He's not going to argue this out or anything. He feels sufficiently chastised, but also very angry that someone is speaking down to him, that anyone would deign to speak down to him. So he decides to go see Rebecca and his son, who is now played by Cameron Crevetti. We don't know why Season 1's Parker Corno was recast, but we now have Cameron Crevetti playing Ryan in Season 2, and he's also been in Big Little Lies before. So that's not really a sci-fi, so I won't really be talking about it much on this show, but I very much enjoyed it. It's kind of a murder mystery thriller type thing, and I really enjoyed it. You guys might like it. It's got Meryl Streep in it, so I mean, come on, go watch it. But he was in that too. So I liked him in that, and hopefully he will also be really great in Season 2 of The Boys. There is a ton that happens in this episode, y'all. It's a lot. So I'm just going to wrap this up today with also saying that the guys tried to meet with Deputy Director Rayner, played by Jennifer Esposito, to talk about the super terrorists and what they've learned, and to say, hey, we're trying to get a copy of that Compound V, we're trying to get a vial of it, but she has finally gotten the missing pieces from them from what she has been looking for. So she's saying it's a Vought coup from the inside, but just as she puts the pieces together, her head explodes, like from the inside out. Just her head though, but very similar to the translucent explosion. So how the heck did that happen? Just the first time she says something out loud that has to do with her figuring out what's going on, her head explodes. And the guys are all going, oh God, and trying to get out of there. They're covered in blood, again, suddenly. And they're wanting to know, who has that superpower? Who has a superpower that can do that? Who can just do that? And even Mother's Milk is like, I don't know who would even be capable of that. It didn't look like the person got lasered or anything else. And also, the boys weren't targeted. They were close enough to get all that blood splatter, but they weren't followed. Their van wasn't destroyed or anything like that. Well, they weren't followed as far as we could tell, but they didn't destroy the van. And if they're able to just explode people's heads from far away, I would imagine that they would just go ahead and kill them if they wanted to get rid of them too. So that assassination was specifically directed towards the deputy director of the CIA. So I'm bummed to see her go as a character. I thought she was really interesting and I liked her, but hey, this is the world that they live in. So we're seeing lots of different replacements, some for the better, some for the worse. It seems Mr. Edgar has a much better reign on Homelander. At least he isn't frightened of him like Madeline was. And so this is going to be a much different fight. And also now the boys have lost that connection to Deputy Director Rayner. So they no longer have that valuable CIA contact. We see in this episode that Annie has decided she's going to blackmail her friend that chops off his limbs. He calls himself Gecko because he's able to grow back body parts like some lizards are able to. They call that when your tail falls off and you're able to grow another one. That's called caudal autolysis. And so a lot of times if a lizard gets scared, only certain types of lizards, but they're able to drop their tail and run off. And so that confuses predators. And also, if the predator has them by the tail, then they're just left holding a tail while the lizard runs off. And so it is self-cutting off. So autolysis, caudal meaning tail. So it's cutting off its own tail. That's one of the cooler things that I learned in my herpetology class in college. So Gecko is doing this, and Annie's like, hey, I'm going to blackmail you for this because you work at Vought in the labs, and I need a copy of Compound V. I need a vial of that. And he is really upset because, one, she has come to him like she's an old friend who happened to run into him at a diner, and now she is blackmailing him, but also he's like, hey, look, I'm pretty much their lab guinea pig. They just want my body parts because they grow back and they're able to do these tests on them without me having to actually die. It's like a more ethical, PR-friendly way for them to get human research material without having to, admit that they're doing it to prisoners or animals or anything like that. They're getting to go straight to human testing. He's like, so I'm their guinea pig. I'm not, anyone of any value in that. And she's like, well, you better get it because I need it. So Annie is also kind of going a little dark side in this way. So, but she needs that Compound V so they can reveal this to the public. She thinks she's doing this for the greater good. And she calls Huey and is super stoked to tell him about Gecko. And she's like, I've got an in. We're going to have a sample of it really soon. But he's still freaked out because he has just washed Deputy Director Rayner's blood and brain matter off of his face. And that upsets Annie. And she outright says, hey, you lied to me the entire time we were together. I can tell when you're lying and you're withholding from me right now. So, of course, there's more tension and she's very upset. Lastly, at least for today, because there's so much going on in this episode, we do also get to see that Billy Butcher has returned home to clean up the mess that everyone has made. But, it's kind of a huge mess. Billy is not necessarily the best at cleaning up messes. He's really great at making them, though. so this just may be the setting for a new Billy Butcher playground. We shall see. In our next episode, we will also talk about episode 2 of The Boys Season 2 and catch up with Kimiko writing the word boy on something repeatedly, much to everyone's confusion, and especially Frenchie's frustration. And we will talk about how the Deep is perhaps going to get an intervention. But for today, this is our stopping place. Thank you for listening to the GSMC Sci-Fi Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'd like to ask that you please subscribe to the show, and writing a nice review always really helps us. Also, if you could please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, I'd appreciate it. Thank you kindly, and have a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.